Hey guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to cook some baby back ribs on the Masterbuilt electric smoker. I've got these baby back ribs here and we're going to cook them low and slow at 225 degrees Fahrenheit with some hickory wood chips for about 4 to 6 hours. And then I'm going to finish it off with some rib glaze from Kosmo's Q. This is peach jalapeno rib glaze and I've heard really good reviews about it, so I'm super excited to try it out. So stick around, let's get to the video. Now the first thing we do with any ribs is we need to unpackage it obviously, and we need to remove this membrane on the back of the ribs. This membrane prevents all the smoke from penetrating through. It's also going to prevent the salt and the rub from penetrating into the meat. Some people like to leave the membrane on to keep the ribs better together, but we're going to cook these ribs to about 185 degrees Fahrenheit. So we're not going to around 205 degrees Fahrenheit, which would be sort of fall off the bone ribs. We're going more clean bite mark type competition style ribs. So I think we want to remove the membrane because we don't need that membrane to hold it all together because we're not going after fall off the bone ribs. So I'll just remove this plastic here. I'll try not to cut myself. It's always good to have some paper towel handy. I probably go through a couple forests of paper towel every year doing my barbecue. All right, we'll take this out and set this down, and then I'll just chuck this into the sink. There we go. All right, so the easiest way to remove the membrane on the back of the ribs is with a paper towel because it helps you grip the slippery membrane and pull it off. So usually what I like to do is I like to start at one of the corners and just get some of it peeled up. Like this. Try to use the back of the knife to kind of pull up the membrane a little bit. And then once you get kind of a little finger hold there, then that's when you switch to your paper towel. And I'll just use a small piece so you guys can see what I'm doing. And you just grab onto it as best you can. And then you just slowly tear it off. I'll show you that so it's easier to see. Just peel it off. You're just peeling it off like it's a candy wrapper. These delicious ribs are being unwrapped and you're gonna dig into them in 4 to 6 hours. There we go. So that's one. And let's remove the membrane on the other one. This one looks a little bit easier. It's already kind of started for me. So I'll see if I can get a grip on it. Oh, that didn't really work that well. Sometimes they're easy to get off and sometimes they're hard to get off. It depends if they've been frozen before, how cold they are, how warm they are, and just how tough the meat is. And really just sometimes depends on the animal and the quality of the meat. But this is kind of the joy of barbecue. Every cut of meat is different. You're going to encounter different challenges for every single cut of meat you do. Some of them are tougher than others, so that's okay. All right, defeated the membrane, removed it. Now that the membrane's off, I've transferred the ribs onto a cutting board, and I've done that just to keep things a little bit cleaner when I'm applying the rub. You'll notice that I put a glove on. I'm gonna touch the meat with this gloved hand, and I'm going to, with my clean hand, touch the rub so I don't have any cross-contamination issues. So now I'm gonna start applying the rub. This is a Kosmo's Q dry rub called Honey Chipotle Killer Bee. It's got pretty good sugar content. The second ingredient is salt, so it's got a lot of salt in it. And this is what we're gonna do to kind of dry brine the ribs before we put them on the smoker. This is one of the first fundamental principles of great barbecue. You wanna brine, either wet brine or dry brine your meat before you put it in the smoker because it's going to allow it to retain moisture and it's going to make it much more flavorable. So let's start applying some of this rub right now. And after we're done applying it, we will let it sit at room temperature for probably about an hour just to get a little dry brining action going on and help temper the meat, let it come up to temperature before we put it on the smoker so that it doesn't have such a long temperature journey to get up to the temperatures that we need it to get to. All right, we'll put that evenly on as evenly as we can. I'm not trying to be too careful. You know, if you want to be really careful, you're going for presentation, then obviously you'd be more careful than that. But right now, I just want to get it kind of loosely on because I'll be flipping this over in a second. Okay, so now we're flipping it over. And the reason that we did the back side first is because we don't want to do this side first and then flip the rub over and get all the rub sort of squished and wet on the bottom, because this is the presentation facing side and this is what people are going to see. So we want to keep that all nice. So we're going to evenly coat this. This is where it's better to be a little bit more careful because, as I said, this is the presentation side. If you want to get crazy, some people put a lot more salt on the bottom of the ribs because that is the part of the ribs that your tongue touches first. And people like to get that salty flavor, and they put more sugary rub on the top to get more of a sugary finish. But if you're just cooking for your family or friends, you don't have to get that crazy. That's more of a competition barbecue type thing. All right, we'll get that nice and evenly coated. Okay, there we go. Now we're gonna let this sit at room temperature. It's gonna dry brine a little bit and we'll come back in 1 hour. All right, these ribs have been dry brining for about an hour now, and you can see that the salt has melted down into the meat. It's drawing out that moisture and then it's sucking it back in, and that's what's gonna make it super tender and really flavorful. We've also got some other nice spices on the outside from this Kosmo's Q rub. It's got some sugar in it, it's got some great stuff. So I'm just gonna blast it with a bit more rub just to draw out a little bit more of that moisture right before I put it onto the smoker. And there we go. All right, so I'll give you a close-up. Look at how red that is. Look at how all the spices have sort of pulled out that moisture. They're mixing in with it. Looks really good, and I haven't even put it in the smoker yet. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these ribs into the Masterbuilt electric smoker. Now the setup I have in my Masterbuilt electric smoker is I just have some tin foil on the bottom to protect it and keep it more clean. And I have a water pan full of half water and half apple cider vinegar. That's just gonna add some flavor and extra moisture to the cooking process. It's gonna keep those ribs nice and moist and tender. And now I'm gonna put the ribs in. I'm going to put them on the middle rack. I don't want them directly over the heat. So try to put these ribs in the middle of the smoker where they'll cook more evenly, and then we'll come back and we'll check them in about an hour. Every hour, we're going to check the temperature of the ribs and add some more wood chips. At 225 degrees, it'll probably take around 2 to 3 hours for your ribs to get about 155 to 165 degrees internal temperature. At that point, the ribs will hit what's called the stall. Basically, all the moisture evaporating from the ribs will start cooling them off and the temperature will stop rising. So when your ribs reach around 155 to 165 degrees, you'll want to apply a thin layer of rib glaze or sauce and let it set up in the smoker for about 10 minutes. After that, it's time to wrap your ribs. Wrapping is the second fundamental pillar of great barbecue. It helps retain moisture and steams the meat so it powers through the stall and cooks faster. For this cook, I'm wrapping in butcher's paper, but you can use aluminum foil as well. Lay out the ribs on some butcher's paper and then drizzle on some liquid. In this case, I'm using some melted butter, Worcestershire sauce, and apple cider vinegar. This is doing two things. First, it's adding some additional moisture to help keep the ribs tender. And second, it's adding some acid to the meat with the apple cider vinegar. With any barbecue, it's always a good idea to have a nice balance of fat, salt, sweet, and acidic flavor to hit all the taste buds. Now wrap it up tightly and make sure the top of the ribs are facing down when you put them back in the smoker. I like to put them facing down because I find it results in more moisture retention and flavor for the ribs. It does dissolve a bit of your bark, but we're going to smoke these another hour unwrapped anyway, so we'll get another chance to firm up and dry out the bark. After an hour, check the temperature in multiple places of the ribs. It should be around 175 to 180 degrees Fahrenheit internal. If it's not, let it cook a bit longer to hit that temperature. Once it hits that temperature, take the ribs out of the wrap and put them meat side facing up again, then smoke them for about another hour unwrapped. After you unwrap them, the ribs will probably stall out at whatever temperature you unwrap them at, so that's why it's important to only unwrap when you hit 175 to 180. Hitting your target temperature is the third fundamental pillar of great barbecue. If you hit your target temp with ribs, then you should have a final product that comes off the bone easily when you bite into it, but it isn't fall off the bone and mushy. For competition barbecue, the meat should come off easily with your teeth, and you should be able to see bite marks in it. After an hour, check the temperature again. They should be around 180. Then do a bend test and see how flexible your ribs are. They should bend quite a bit into a semicircle shape, and the bark on the top should start cracking apart a little bit. If you pass all these three tests, then the ribs are done. Now the last step and the fourth and final fundamental pillar of great barbecue is to let the ribs rest. Resting is going to allow the meat to retain more moisture and it'll be much more tender. For these ribs, I let them rest for about 30 minutes. All right, so these ribs have come off the Masterbuilt electric smoker and we've let them rest for about 30 minutes. So now we're gonna cut into them and I'm excited to see what this Kosmo Q peach jalapeno rib glaze is gonna taste like. I'm pretty pumped to take a bite out of this. All right, let's take a cut over here. All right, let's cut into this. Whew, look at that. That looks nice. So we'll cut another slice off here to get a nice rib. And there we go. So this is what it looks like at the end of the day, and looks pretty good. Looks like it's retained some moisture, and it looks like it's got a nice bark formation. Pretty sticky on the outside from that Kosmo Q jalapeno peach. So let's take a bite out of it and see how it tastes. Oh yeah. That's really good. Doesn't fall off the bone, just comes apart in your teeth and it leaves noticeable teeth marks, which is exactly what we're looking for. So that's awesome. And it tastes really good. This is actually, it's pretty spicy, but it's not too spicy. I think the heat of the smoker kind of mellowed out the spiciness of the rib glaze. So it's a nice sort of subdued taste. I think it's probably good enough for anyone's palate. So I've cut these all up and let's take a look at another one here. This is a thicker one. So look at all that moisture. Wow, that looks great. Oh my God, that looks good. I'm gonna take a bite of that. Oh man. That's so good. You can definitely taste the peach, the jalapeno. It's got some spice to it. You can see the bite marks here. Came apart easily, but it wasn't fall off the bone, which is exactly what we want. This is a perfect rib. I love it. Oh, this is good. Wow, look at that bark too. That bark just comes apart. This is a great rib, especially coming from the Masterbuilt electric smoker. Oh, that's good. All right, guys. Thanks a lot for watching the video. I hope you found it helpful. Hit that subscribe button if you're not already subscribed, because I'll be cooking up a lot more ribs on the Masterbuilt electric smoker in the coming year. Thanks a lot again. Happy smoking.